And I'm going to change this to shows. Okay, welcome everybody. Glad to see you again. Guess you're not all gone for holidays yet, although they're certainly sneaking up on us pretty quickly. As always, like to thank our sponsors, Care First Health Plan, Valley of the Sun United Way, Satellite Broadcasting and Communications Association, Triad Wireless, and Karen Ziegler Consulting Services. So thank you all for your support. Do we have any new people on the call today? Guy, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm with Smith Bagley. I'm located in Sholo. I've sat on a couple of calls as a fly on the wall, but this is the time I first officially announced myself. But I work as a product manager for Cell One up here in Sholo. And yeah, we're getting snow.
Okay. Well, thanks. Well, welcome, Guy. And Philip, we're going to introduce you in just a second. So hang on there. Anybody else that's new to us this morning? Doesn't look like it. Okay, so moving on. So you hopefully have all seen my email that we are going to be changing our meeting time from our 7:30 a.m. to 3 o'clock on Monday afternoon. I know some people are very happy about that. Other people, it's like, it kind of interrupts the day. But I think you all know, we've had this discussion a couple of times, that there's a couple of really key people that need to be here and to provide our updates. And so we really felt that it was important to change the day and time, the time when they were available. So we will be meeting as of January, not the rest of this month, but as of January, we'll be meeting at 3 o'clock instead of the 7:30 a.m. And I will be sending out meeting invites shortly. I just didn't want to confuse people right now. So I don't know if any of you have any comments or thoughts or whatever, but that's kind of what's happening. Okay, moving on. So if you'll indulge me for a moment, I'd like to have a little levity for this meeting this morning. I came across an old email that someone sent me some time ago, and I thought it was actually very apropos with what's happening with digital inclusion these days. So if you don't mind, I'm going to share this with you. And it's called, If Abbott and Costello Were Around Today. I think most of you are of that age that you remember Who's on, the Abbott and Costello did Who's on First. Well, this is kind of a takeoff on that. And again, I want to share this with you. I appreciate it, your indulgence. So it says, Costello calls to buy a computer from Abbott. Abbott, super duper computer store. Can I help you? Costello, thanks. I'm setting up an office in my den and I'm thinking about buying a computer. Abbott, Mac? No, the name's Lou. Your computer. I don't own a computer. I want to buy one. Mac, question mark. Mac, I told you my name's Lou. What about Windows? Why? Will it get stuffy in here? Abbott, do you want a computer with Windows? Costello, I don't know. What will I see when I look in the windows? Wallpaper. Never mind the windows. I need a computer and software. Software for Windows? No, on the computer. I need something I can use to write proposals, track expenses, and run my business. What have you got? Office. Yeah, for my office. Can you recommend anything? Abbott, I just did. You just did what? Recommended something. You recommended something? Yes. For my office? Yes. Okay, what did you recommend for my office? Office. Yes, for my office. I recommended office with Windows. I already have an office with Windows. Okay, let's just say I'm sitting at my computer and want to type a proposal. What do I need? Word. What word? Word in Office. The only word in Office is Office. The word in Office for Windows. Which word in Office for Windows? The word you get when you click the blue W. Costello, I'm going to click your blue W if you don't start with some straight answers. Okay, forget that. Can I watch movies on the internet? Yes, you want reel one. Maybe a real one, maybe a cartoon. What I watch is none of your business. Just tell me what I need. Reel one. Anybody know what reel one is? Anyway, it's a long movie. I also want to see reel 2, 3, and 4. Can I watch them? Of course. Great. With what? Reel one. Okay, I'm at my computer. I want to watch a movie. What do? You click the blue one. I click the blue one. What? The blue one. Is that different from the blue W? The blue one is real one, and the blue W is Word. What word? The word in Office for Windows. But there's 3 words in Office for Windows. No, just one, but it's the most popular word in the world. It is? Yes, but to be fair, there aren't many other words left. It pretty much wiped out all the other words out there. And that word is reel one. Reel one has nothing to do with Word. Reel one isn't even part of the Office. Stop. Don't start that again. What about financial bookkeeping? You have anything I can track my money with? Money. That's right. What do you have? I need money. I need money to track my money. It comes bundled with your computer. What's bundled with my computer? Money. Money comes with my computer. Yes, no extra charge. I get a bundle of money with my computer. How much? 1 copy. Isn't it illegal to copy money? Microsoft gave us a license to copy money. They can give you a license to copy money? Why not? They own it. A few days later, super duper computer store. Can I help you? How do I turn my computer off? Click on start. That's it. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of fun. So just got a note from Janet Major that she can't be here this morning. And let's get back to this.
Steve, can you share that? That was good.
Yeah, I'd be glad to do that. Wasn't that fun?
Yeah.
It's sort of relevant to digital inclusion issues, right? Anyway, I'm moving on. So we had a brief meeting regarding the FCC Affordable Connectivity Outreach Grant Program. We had about a half a dozen people or so who attended that meeting, heard from some of the folks who were planning to apply. And in particular, we heard from Robert with Wichita Port La Causa, who's planning to apply, I believe, Robert, for your 5-state region.
Yes, Steve, for a 5-state region, and then also Puerto Rico.
Yeah. And then, and they certainly have a great outreach throughout the state. Aaron, you weren't on the call. Are you planning to apply?
Sorry, trying to find my mute button. We are, yes.
Okay. And then we had some discussion about others who are thinking about collaborating with Robert or others that are planning to apply for that grant. So anyway, just wanted to bring you up to date about that. I haven't seen, is Sandeep online yet? I don't know if he's going to make it this morning. Excuse me. So, whoops, where did it go? So I need to introduce this morning and actually put him on early on the agenda. Philip Sang, who is the new IT project manager with the Office of Digital Teaching and Learning at ADE. And he is going to be our primary contact over there, along with Karina Jones. And so, Philip, you want to introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about what your job is going to be, and share any thoughts about what you're working on now?
Yeah, good morning. Sorry I don't have my camera on. I'm actually in the parking lot at ADE because I have orientation. So I just completed my first week. So like Steve said, my name is Philip Sang. I'm the new IT project manager for the Office of Digital Teaching and Learning with Karina Jones, Kelly Crucy, and Shelby Brown. A few things we're working on at this moment. We're pushing forward to phase four of the Final Mile project with Mylan Eden. Kelly is going full steam with her Trust Ed apps project. And then we're all also working together in tandem about cybersecurity and the products throughout our LEAs and our BIE schools. So my email is philip with 2 L's .seng@azed.gov if you need to connect or get in contact with me. So look forward to meeting with you every week and discussing how we can move things forward.
Okay, thank you, Philip. So I met with John Kelly and I met with Philip and Karina and what's Beth's last name?
Neely.
Beth Neely last week to begin the discussion about how we can best work together and collaborate. And we will be continuing to have that discussion as they move forward in developing their plans for us to look at how we can help support their planning and hopefully be an advocate for their plans on into the future. So look forward to that great relationship with them. Okay, moving on. So Sandeep is not here this morning. He may be here later. Nicole, I don't believe you're online either this morning. And this, of course, is the reason why we're changing our meeting time. Excuse me, is because this is a difficult time for both Nicole and Sandy to be able to attend our morning meetings. So moving on, that Nicole is going to be in conjunction with the broadband office is going to be holding a couple of NTIA Arizona industry listening sessions for, and again, that's for industry people. It's not for the whole world, but specifically for industry people. The tentative dates are January 11th and January the 18th, again, to get input from industry representatives regarding the BEAD funding. And so as soon as we get that information from Nicole, I will share it with the task force. Okay, Casey, are you online yet? Not seeing Casey yet. So I guess hopefully he'll be here a little later to provide our presentation. So we're tentatively going to be, if he joins us today, will be Casey Ratliff, who is the Director of Government Relations and Grassroots Advocacy with Grand Canyon State Electric Co-op. We discussed a little bit at the last meeting. People had some questions about what the electric co-ops are doing. So we've asked Casey to join us for the meeting today to do an update. Hopefully he will be here shortly. Okay. Moving on, events, we got a couple of things coming up. The Arizona Technology Council Tucson Holiday Mixer is coming up on the 14th. Always fun. The Phoenix office just had their party last week. I don't know, Mark, if you want to make any comments about that. Is he online? I don't think Mark's here either. Okay, so moving on. Kirk, you want to say anything about your data center and smart city summit coming up on January 26th?
Yeah, we have a data center smart city IoT Edge Summit, January 26th. I guess we're going to be hosting the broadband stakeholder roundtable. There again, Mark's the focal point for that. Mark's in Alaska right now.
Okay.
Sun doesn't come up for a couple days. And he's connecting Alaska with a bunch of satellite earth stations and all kinds of stuff I don't understand. But yeah, we'll be doing a thing like we did last year on April 4th, but this year it's the 26th. And the weekend before that is a STEM Fest at Barrett-Jackson with the SciTech Institute. So we'll be doing both those events kind of together, and the CSOs, Chief Science Officers with the SciTech Institute, will help run the summit and also be a big fundraiser.
Okay. Any other events, announcements that people want to share before we move on? Hearing no, we'll go ahead and jump in. Again, Sandeep is not here this morning. Mala, I believe you're online.
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, we got your update 3 times now. The meeting request this time. You said you sent it out, right? And didn't show up, but it did finally. So whatever you did right, except that your server sent it out multiple times.
Yeah,
Just wanted to know.
we're having some email issues, and so we figured out a temporary solution for that. So anyway,
Okay, it did make it.
yeah.
Whatever you did. Okay. Just a very quick update. Don't have too much to say. E-rate, we got about 72 million of the 100 million that we have applied for schools and libraries. For Arizona, they're working their way through the rest of it. Hopefully we'll see some more by the end of before the end of the year. It's also the time for any updates that schools and libraries have to make for who is responsible for E-rate in their respective institutions, financially, IT-wise, everything. So this is the time they can update their administrative module, and they have until, I think, the middle of January to do that. So trying to get libraries to work on that, especially those that have any new branches or any updates on their square footage and those kind of things. Or anyone who has left or new person taking over, so their IT staff or admin staff who can access the portal can be updated now. I did mention last time that Funds for Learning submitted a proposal for the pilot cybersecurity E-rate program to FCC. They have asked for a provision of 60 million per year for 3 years, for the next 3 years, until FCC figures out the long-term needs that they need to associate with cybersecurity support. So that this is just a proposal, and FCC, they did have a meeting with FCC to consider that, but no further progress on that. At the same time, there is a lot of momentum on getting E-rate to reimburse cybersecurity this year itself. Their eligible services list has not yet been released. Usually by this time it will be released, but it hasn't been released yet. So there is some hope that they're working on trying to get cybersecurity into E-rate. So Shelby is also working on it. And last week, Congresswoman Doris Matsui sent a letter to FCC again urging them to consider cybersecurity as a reimbursable expense for E-rate. So there's just momentum, lots of momentum in that direction. As far as ACP is concerned, we have about 338,564 households that have been connected. It's up from last week by about 3,000 households. So there's still.
Mala, can I ask a question about the enrolled households? Because I attended a webinar where they talked about ACP, and they said that a lot of the households that are signed up for ACP are people that have already had internet but are getting it at the discount. Is that true, or do you know how that applies to Arizona's numbers?
I don't know where they get that information from, or even if they did a survey or something, because that information is not trackable, at least not publicly trackable. I don't know. And you could be right. It could be people who may not be able to afford the speeds, which is also a part of the program. If you have 3 or 4 kids in the house and the family is also working, parents or anyone else, the adults in the family are working from home, their internet speeds need to be increased. And if they don't have the increased bandwidth or can't afford to pay for the increased bandwidth, then they are in serious trouble. It's as good as not having it, you know. So I guess that is also a part of the goal of the program, is what I'm trying to say. So whichever way it is, whether they are working on increasing the bandwidth or getting it for the first time, it's still serving the goals of ACP.
Yeah, I guess they said in terms of getting long-term funding, Congress to provide long-term funding for ACP, they would need to show that there's a lot of people who've never had internet who are getting it through ACP.
That's the way we are going to track this new grant. That's the January 9th deadline that FCC has put out. There, the emphasis is on trying to reach people who have not been reached so far, or who have, or who are on tribal lands that they can't afford it. You know, so that's what FCC's new program is trying to track. And it's probably easier to track that now that they are applying for it now than to go back and start tracking EBB that turned into ACP to see whether they really didn't have internet before, or they just had a hotspot from school for the kids and they're trying to get more internet access for the adults in the house. I really don't know.
Okay.
Could
So-
I add something, Mala?
Yes, sure,
Just-
please.
This is Cindy, real quick. Yeah, it stands to reason, Henry, because I get a notification from Cox about once a week saying that I could apply for a federal program. So the way they can reach people is if they already have an account, they're putting out PSAs to let people know about the program. So like Drew said in the chat, that's the low-hanging fruit. It's really easy for them to contact people that already have it. It's the ones that don't have it. That's the conundrum, really, is how to reach people who don't have it. And I was thinking, I rolled over this morning thinking a lot of people that don't have it don't have computers, they don't have knowledge about computers. So it's almost a it's a real difficult thing to reach people who've never had internet before, to get them onto this program.
Right.
Yeah. You're right, Cindy. Even if, I mean, I know my daughter moved, when she moved from her old house to the new house, she cut off internet in her old house, but we still get mail at that house, and they keep asking her to re-enroll for ACP. Maybe they think that she cut off internet because she is not, she can't afford it. So you're right, you know, they are sending out flyers, but again, who do they send it to? You know, they're not mailing it to each and every household that has not got internet. And I think that takes us to the next point, which is on the mapping, FCC's mapping, because that's the only way I think we can figure out who does not have internet. And FCC's maps are out now, the fabric that they were talking about. And of course, it does not include many of our anchor institutions. Most, in fact, unless the anchor institution is a part of a government building, it is not on the map. I checked a few of them and at random, and I didn't see them. The multi-tenant dwellings are not included. So if there is internet to the main office in an apartment, then that is listed as served, whereas all of the other multiple apartments may not have access. Some communities are totally left out of the map because they probably didn't make it to the map. So there is a challenge process to this, and we need to figure out how that challenge process works so that the maps are challenged. If that is going to be the basis on which the BEAD money is going to be distributed, we really need to look at it seriously. I'm not a map expert, so it's hard, it is difficult to do this. There are multiple layers to this as well. So I might be missing something, so I may not be the expert looking at it correctly. So if anyone wants to do that, I think that should be the one we should take up next, Steve, if that's possible. Get a team together to take a look at the FCC maps.
Actually, Mala, I was just looking at my notes here before and forgot to mention that we are actually planning to do that.
Okay.
Paul Ross, who you all know with
Yes.
Phoenix College, and Rory Conway with Triad, who are regular participants in the task force, have agreed to step up, and we need to talk with Sandeep and Mylan and Nicole, and of course you, Mala, who are very knowledgeable about this, to come together with anybody else who is interested to talk about, to learn more about it. We had a good discussion last time. We had a good discussion when we were kibitzing, but we really need to come together and kind of figure out where do we go with this. Does anybody know, Mala, maybe you know about the mapping? Can anybody submit comments, or is it only for providers or the state, or anybody can do? You happen to know what that process is?
You can, anyone, I mean, who's challenging it, it could be a part of an anchor institution. It's not a lay person, if that's what I want to say, but you need to be a part of an anchor institution or someone who wants to be on the map, whose institution needs to be on the map. You can challenge it, but in order to challenge it, you need to have data to prove that what you're saying is correct, versus what FCC has published. So here again, a lay person is not going to have access to the data. It has to be an institution that is challenging it. Well, it could be a lay person who is in a multi-dwelling place, but you need to have access to what you're saying.
Steve, isn't Sandeep under the recent RFQ, going to hire a vendor to set up an Arizona challenge to the FCC maps? Isn't that part of the RFQ?
The answer is yes, Henry, I believe it is. But there's also the timing for, excuse me, for submitting comments is coming up in February, if I'm not mistaken.
I thought it was, what was it, January? I forget, 13th or 19th.
Yeah. And I will need to talk with Nicole. She's not here today, but I do need to talk with Nicole. But, as I mentioned earlier, that they're having this listening session for the providers. And of course, I'm guessing, and again, this is speculation on my part, unless anybody knows differently, that will be a part of the discussion is the broadband mapping and input from the providers. That was part of the strategy for TIA, was to gather input from providers, which is one of the reasons they're doing these listening sessions.
One of the issues I think Arizona is having is getting data submissions from tribal entities.
Yeah.
I think that's a big gap that Arizona should address, and Sandeep is on top of this, but any help getting data from tribes before January 13th so that Arizona can submit bulk challenges for tribal regions would be very helpful and bring more money to the state.
So this is Shelby Brown, and I'm with Department of Education, and Mylan has asked me to reach out to a bunch of my tribal schools, like the BIE schools, because they're not really associated with Department of Ed, so we wouldn't have their data. So I've reached out to everybody, and I think 4 people have agreed to send in information, but that, and Sandeep is aware, that is a big problem, is a lot of them are PO boxes. One school actually has longitude, latitude that they're going to include, and some of them said we have some hand-drawn maps. Would that help? So I literally got an email just a few minutes ago from someone in Tuba City who said, all of our addresses are PO boxes. We have no street addresses. Do you want us to send that in? So those are kind of some of the challenges that we're kind of running into. I don't know. I'm not sure what Sandeep is going to do with that information. I don't know if they're going to file a big challenge, because I did have one school say, hey, we can get longitude, latitude, but that's going to take a little bit of time. And also it's winter, so it's cold. But then, you know, that would have to be addressed on how you go about doing that too. Obviously, we wouldn't make the January 13th deadline. But anyways, I just wanted to share that with you.
Can I just add a little bit of context, please?
Sure.
Mhm.
So, and it's mostly just mostly I just want to put this out there because everybody already knows, but it's worth repeating. You know, the tribes can challenge the maps themselves. What is potentially disingenuous and perpetuates extractive and transactional behavior is that Arizona is seeking the data from the tribes to get more money for the state of Arizona without any comfort or confidence that the money that Arizona gets in addition to what it's currently allocated will actually go to the tribes, which is tremendously problematic. So if we're going to the tribes and saying, hey, give us your data, which violates sovereignty and is all kinds of problematic. I think there needs to be, and this is, I think, recognizing that this is my lens that I'm putting over top of this. There is hesitancy on the part of the tribes to do that. I know a few of the tribes are submitting their own challenges, but there also needs to be conversations from Arizona that are specific to the tribes and the inadequate amount of funding that was set aside for tribes. So if we're asking tribes to be the providers of the data that gets us from a place where we're getting less money to a place where we're getting more money, there also has to be consideration about what that looks like from an allocation standpoint to the tribes who are providing the data. I think another one of the pieces, and so set aside that for the tribes piece, one of the other strategies that's currently being employed is going directly to the economic development groups who are part of rural communities and asking them to do batch challenges. For some, the data for their region is so inaccurate that they're just submitting a batch of all of the things in our area are inaccurate, just submitting a full batch. One last place is there is a challenge being submitted related to mobile homes. And so some folks who had for a long time been doing address mapping for mobile homes in Arizona, and there are a ton of them, as you know, those are all listed as having access. And from what we can tell, very few of them, if any, actually do. So there's a couple of different places, but the economic development folks, the city planning folks, those folks are going to be the ones who in batch challenge are going to be able to actually reach that January 13 deadline, because organizing teams right now and just beginning the process, it is, you know, we are 1 month out with holidays fast approaching. And there are folks who have pilots that are underway that are going to be supportive. Yeah, just wanted to add that little bit.
Thank you, Erin. And I don't want to get into a lengthy discussion about the mapping today, because we are going to try to have a separate meeting on mapping, just because there's lots of stuff to talk about, like we've already started to discuss this morning. One last thing that I wanted to mention is that part of Nicole's responsibility right now is to contact, and this is true throughout the country, is that they are contacting every provider in the state to get their input. So she's in the process of doing that. And I'm assuming that that's part of the reason why she's doing the listening sessions also. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. Okay, moving on. Let me get back to the agenda here. So Holly, do you have anything else that you'd like to add from the state library perspective?
No, I think Mala covered it all. Thank you.
Okay, and Mala, is there anything new regarding the telehealth and libraries project?
Not yet. Well, maybe the new year. I'll give you some updates on what's happening.
Okay, thank you. So Janet is not here this morning. She couldn't make it. She had a conflict. We've already heard from Philip. And I don't believe Mylan's online. Cindy, do you have anything you want to share?
No real updates, Steve. Thanks.
Okay. Elena and Drew, anything more on the awareness campaign?
Not on the campaign. And we're, Steve, as you might remember, we are looking at the ACP outreach grant right now, and we have some questions into the FCC. So we'll send an update if we hear any clarity on remote enrollment assistance and some of the eligibility questions.
Okay. And let's talk, Drew, if there's a need for us to find a way to share that information with everybody who's applying.
Yep.
Okay. Erin, did you have anything else you want to add?
Just that we are continuing to plan for the February 1st State of Digital Equity benefit dinner. I'm thrilled to say that we will have Vince Cerf joining us, and we will be honoring him with a Lifetime Achievement Award. We're also planning to honor Jessica Rosenworcel and a few other folks. We are rounding out our speakers. It is just an incredible group of talented, amazing humans who have been generous their time. So look for more information about that. I think we should have all of the speakers finalized soon, and we'll send out the save the date soon.
Okay. Do you want to say anything, Erin, or you're not in a position to talk about what you're thinking about applying for with the digital equity program?
Are you referring to the response to the RFQ?
Yeah, no, the connectivity outreach grant program.
I think we're still exploring the strategy, but I will say that we have landed on an Arizona focused initiative. The only way that we would engage with other states is likely if their state counterpart for me was interested and asked us to jump in, so that we're not, because we don't have a home in any other state. So exploring that, but likely to stick in Arizona using the 12-week pilot that has been tremendously successful with Common Sense, creating space for folks who are part of this group and other groups to help with that, to ensure it reaches as many folks as it possibly can. So we're looking at what the appropriate monitoring and evaluation mechanism is, how many people we intend to reach, how many stakeholders we need to make sure that we're effectively reaching all those folks, and what the prioritization of events and campaigns would need to be supportive of a statewide effort.
Okay. Any questions for Erin? Okay, moving on. Zach, do you want to just share what you just included in the message to me?
Yeah, hi, my name is Zach Rycrook. I'm the Director of Operations for Smith Baggy Cellular One, but my primary role of the last 2 years has been heavily focused on federal funding, as well as working with the tribes. And while working with all the tribes and working with mapping and trying to put together applications, I was part of the NTIA grant currently granted to the Navajo Nation, as well as some other applications. Working with the teams there. We were a subrecipient on that grant, and I was just kind of listening in on the meeting today and hearing about the challenges and contacts at the tribes, and gathering specific data regarding BDC. We also, as you know, as a provider, have to submit maps and data, which we have done for all of our tribal areas as well. And I just mentioned, as you go through your mapping meetings, if there's something that I can do to assist the group or the state in general with maybe contacts or capturing data. I know a lot of the tribes have their own initiatives that they're working on right now. I know that there's a group that we are a part of, the Alliance for Navajo Broadband, that is pushing for collecting data as well. And so there might be some resources outside of the ones mentioned here that we could possibly help put in contact with the right people. So just wanted to throw that out there. And if you could just include me in those meetings, if it wasn't going to be a blanket invite to the entire group, that possibly could be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay, moving on. Again, Nicole's not here today. Derek, you're here. Any updates for Sun Corridor? Derek, you still here? Okay, moving on. So I don't think Rory's even online today, or Mylan. So Casey, I think you're here now, are you not?
I am.
Oh, there's Rory. Okay, Rory. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, we lit up St. John's yesterday. Our guys are out there doing residential installs, and so that one's finished. Holbrook's pretty much finished, and we just have 2 more left to do. So we're getting close to getting them tied up.
Okay, anything else? Okay, if not, I'm going to stop sharing and introduce Casey.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
Might not hurt to ping Mr. Kelly. I see John Kelly's on board. Maybe we could ping him.
Okay. John, did you have anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, how hard it is to find the mute button. That's what I wanted to talk about. No, I think obviously there's what I've been saying in a lot of presentations lately is we're living in the giant snow globe right now, where everything's getting shaken up. We can't really see very far because of the leadership changes all across the board. So I think this group is sort of a source of some degree of consistency and constancy, which I think is very valuable right now to the decision makers and operators. And so I just commend this group for continuing to be on point, but we'll continue to feed into this from my perspective and others, all the different changes that are going on. I would say that I am looking at, I've heard secondhand from Mylan that we've gone through our E-rate matching grant funds. So I think several of us are going to be talking to some legislators in the governor's office about potentially recapitalizing that in the new legislative session. So more to come on that.
So while John is speaking, that John and Karen Ziegler and Jan Schiller, Jan is online today too, have agreed to help lead the update of our strategic plan for the TAP that we did back in 2020. And I hope to be able to connect Jan, you and John and Karen maybe tomorrow to kind of map out how we're going to proceed with that process. So I know we tried to do that last week and just couldn't make it happen, but would like to do that and get that process rolling along. And I think John, partially, besides the fact we've been talking about the need to do that, but I think it also was precipitated by you commenting that with the new governor coming on board, new state school superintendent and others, that we really needed to have some plans and recommendations from this task force. So hopefully we can get that done, get that meeting together fairly soon. Okay.
Steve, can you shoot me Paul's email information, please? I've been looking for it, and I shot you an email, but I didn't hear back from you.
Sure. And Rory, also, when I send out the updates of the meeting, that the list of attendees is included, but I'll be glad to send that to you.
Oh, then my apologies. Apparently I didn't scroll down far enough.
Okay.
I'll go through that. Don't worry.
Well, actually, he may not have been on the call last week, so he may not have been. But I will definitely get it to you today. Okay. With that, unless there's any quick questions or comments, I'm going to turn it over to Casey. Introduce Casey. Casey, it's good to have you back to kind of give us an update on what's happening with electric co-ops.
Sure. Well, Steve, thank you. Let me go ahead and see if I can successfully share my screen here.
Okay.
Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Yes. Okay, perfect. So it's been a couple of years since I have spoken to this group. So I'll probably have to just kind of give some background, and then we can get to what Mojave Electric Cooperative is doing. By way of background, my name is Casey Ratliff. I'm the Director of State Government Relations at the Grand Canyon State Electric Co-op Association. We represent all of the electric co-ops here in the state of Arizona. We have 6 distribution co-ops, 1 generation and transmission co-op, and we'll get to a map of where they reside in the state. But I think it's important when you're talking about broadband and co-ops, why that makes sense, right? It seems strange to think about it for someone, maybe not for you all, because I'm sure you've heard about it, read about it, and maybe have seen it firsthand. But for a lot of folks, legislators included, it just doesn't really seem like a marriage made in heaven. But when you go all the way back to the 1930s, which, as you see here, 1935, the Rural Electric Administration was launched. That was launched out of necessity because rural areas throughout the country did not have the same level of access to electricity that you had in the urban areas. And this was something that came out of FDR's New Deal. Of course, he was a New Yorker from a prominent family in New York. Really no issues to getting access to electricity, but he would vacation in, I believe it's Hot Springs or Warm Springs, Georgia, or rural Georgetown. And he noticed that very little access to electricity was had there. And so when he went back to Washington, he made sure that this was a part of his agenda moving forward in terms of the New Deal. And so you can just see here in the early to mid 30s, only 10% of the country's farms had electric service. You contrast that with the urban dwellers, that's at 90%. By 1953, more than 90% of the farms in the US had electricity. And this really, this tracks really with what we've seen here in Arizona. Sulphur Springs Valley Electric Co-op, which is in Cochise County. They were the first co-op to be incorporated, which I believe was 1937. And then Trico Electric Co-op, which is based in Marana outside of Tucson. They were the last. I believe they were 1953. But moving on, see how I can do that here. What is a co-op? A co-op is, we are private, we're not for profit. Any profits that we incur are referred to as capital credits. And those capital credits, otherwise known as margins, are paid to our members at the approval of the board. We're owned by those that we serve. So of course, we're member driven. And if you're oftentimes you'll hear me refer to members. And this is always something I have to educate stakeholders and legislators on, because if you're talking about EPS, SRP, TEP, they have, of course, ratepayers. You know, we in co-op world, we don't have ratepayers, we have members, because when you pay your rate, or so when you pay your electric bill, the rates that we set, you're paying into the co-op that you have a ownership stake in. And so you're a member. When you're a member, you're an owner, and you get to vote on the locally elected board. And I think this is important, as we'll talk about later, because it was the locals who came to Mojave Electric Co-op's board and their CEO and asked them to take a look into broadband and to complete a feasibility study. And by virtue of being a co-op, it was important to their board and their CEO to be responsive to that. And so I think that is an example of where you really saw the co-op model work for the good of the community. Here's a map showing where we are in the state. My boss, my CEO, Dave Locke, always likes to say, when you've seen a co-op, you've seen a co-op. The the point to take home there is that every co-op is going to be different. Does broadband make sense for every co-op? No. But right now it makes sense for a Mojave Electric co-op. And this is also something that, I'm not here to talk, electric issues, but when we're working with the ACC or the legislature, anytime that there's a sort of a one-size-fits-all approach, and I think this could also be true for broadband, it typically doesn't work for co-ops, just because our geography is different, our member interests are going to be different, so on and so forth. But you see here, if you're in the White Mountains or the White Mountain Apache Reservation, you have Apache Electric Co-op, and then you go south from there to Graham and Duncan Valley, all the way down to Sulphur Springs, and then out west of the Trica. The Generation and Transmission Co-op is APCO, Arizona Electric Power Cooperative. That's the star in the middle of Sulphur Springs service territory. They're the Generation and Transmission Co-op. As you'd expect, they generate and transmit that power. Of course, this is old hat to everybody here. But what we've seen develop across the country is co-ops taking on broadband programs, in some way, shape, or form. Some co-ops are leasing their dark fiber because if you're an electric utility, a lot of times you're going to have dark fiber assets to allow for it's just a modern grid, right? To allow for your substations and even meters now to talk in real time. So that way, if you have an outage, you know exactly where that outage is. You can pinpoint it. Well, those dark fiber assets sometimes are being leased to third-party providers. Some co-ops are providing a broadband program, soup to nuts, fiber to the premise, but also they are being a provider themselves. So we have about 150 co-ops in the US have a broadband program. You're sitting at about probably 750 co-ops throughout the US. Why does it make sense for certain co-ops? For the same reason electricity made sense in the 30s. You're not for profit. You're accustomed to expanding critical infrastructure beyond city limits. In many places, the infrastructure already exists. Mojave Electric Co-op is the first co-op in the state of Arizona to launch a broadband program. Now, I think I skipped some slides here. That's okay, keep going. Now, in doing our research for some legislation that we were running in 2020, we felt that it was important to just highlight some of the reasons that broadband is important for rural areas. Of course, these are some of the statistics that we saw from organizations throughout the country that did research here. 80% of high school students report needing internet access to complete homework assignments at least a few times a week. The benefits of telehealth, we talked often about telehealth being so important. It was critical during the pandemic. Without broadband access, you're not getting access to telehealth. And then, of course, economic development is so critically important. And I think one thing that we saw during the electrification of rural areas is that it stemmed the tide of depopulation. Bringing electricity to rural areas, it stemmed a tide of depopulation in these rural areas. No longer did you have to move to the city to get access to modern technology, but you can get it right here at home, whether you're in Safford, Arizona, Wilcox, Arizona, or a multitude of small towns throughout the US. That could be the same thing, as we all know here today, that could occur with respect to broadband. So it is really interesting to see the parallels between electricity and broadband, and just the ways that electricity made life easier. Like, for instance, it reduced milking times for farmers and dairymen in the US by 50%. Having electric washing machines reduced the amount of time that it took for a household to wash their clothes by 9 hours every week. you take that and you just start thinking about how that could, what would that look like in 2022, 2023 in a rural community? What could take less time in this day and age than by adding broadband connectivity? So SB 1460 was the bill that we worked on in 2020. Essentially, it did two things. One, it explicitly authorized in statute that a co-op can have a broadband program. We felt that the ACC could grant us that authority. We felt like there was really nothing in statute that prevented us from having a broadband program. But of course, if you are going to embark on a $100 million project, you want to have belt and suspenders, right? And so we just wanted to make sure that statute explicitly authorized that, so it couldn't be challenged. The next thing was, and I think maybe this was the most important thing, was that it codified that should the installation of broadband fiber reduce the fair market value of a property, then the property owner is entitled to just compensation that is based on the diminution of the property's value. Okay, well, what does that mean? Why is that important? It stems from a case in Missouri where there was a class action lawsuit against a Show Me Power cooperative. Show Me Power was the generation and transmission co-op in Missouri. They were wildly successful. They have, because a lot of your generation transmission co-ops, they're the ones that have the most dark fiber. They leased their fiber to a third-party provider who then provided the broadband services. It made sense, right? You're killing two birds with one stone. You're still providing that electric power, but you have those smart, you have those dark fiber assets that allow your transformers and substations to talk. Well, let's just go ahead and monetize the rest and provide a service to our members. The problem that they saw in Missouri was that should a case be brought to the courts, there wasn't one standard that you had to use to identify what damages would be. Typically, it is what's called a fair market value standard, but it was an out-of-state trial attorney from Indiana who found folks within the service territory that he was able to get to be part of the lawsuit, and he was able to successfully argue that the standard that should be used is the fair market rental value standard. Now, I'm not a lawyer. A lot of that sounds like legalese, right? But the important thing to take away here was that by using the fair market rental value standard, the co-op's revenues was made admissible in court. And they were able to argue that the co-op made, many millions of dollars off of this new program. And so that should be distributed to the plaintiffs. Eventually, that was settled down to a more appropriate amount, but it really caused a lot of co-ops throughout the country to take a step back and take a pause. And so you saw a number of states work to identify what that standard should be in their respective states. So that's what we did. And so SB 1460 was passed in 2020 by a near unanimous margin. It was signed by the governor, Governor Ducey. And so it's now in effect. But that provided those two things there, provided the belt and suspenders that Mojave Electric Cooperative felt like they needed to proceed. So going to the Mojave's project, like I said, they're the first co-op in Arizona to undertake broadband. A bit of the timeline is that the board approved the project in September of 2019. The goal was to build fiber to the premise of every member within a co-op. There's about 35,000, give or take, members in Mojave Electric Co-op service territory. And they have really two bands. If you recall the map, and Steve, I think I sent these slides to you, you can see on their map where it's primarily Bullhead City along the river. That's the more populated area. But then you go out east and you have Wickiup. You have Peach Springs on the Wallapai Reservation. It's a very sparsely populated area. And they're building fiber to the premise of all of those members, whether you're in Bullhead City or in the more sparsely populated areas. Of course, all of this was contingent upon the ACC approving the loan agreement. They did. What we did also was to put in a sort of a barrier between the revenues and the expenditures associated with the broadband project and the electric side of the business. So there's no commingling. There is a very strong fence around, a very strong barrier around those two separate projects. So they're, you know, separately funded. It was very important to the ACC to see that. And it's also very important to our members to make sure that if you're not of course, it just makes sense. If you're not a broadband customer, you shouldn't be subsidizing that project. So that was very important to us to make sure that that took place. The partner that we have, Trans Rural Network, they're a telecom co-op based out of Tampa, Florida. The goal is to have complete coverage of our service territory in 5 years. The first connection was in June 2021. So by the end of 26, we hope to have that happen. The range service ranges from 2525 to 1 gig. Currently, over 7,000 members have access to fiber. That is primarily in the Bullhead City area. And that was based on when the feasibility study was taking place, and we were reaching out to members, or I should say the co-op Mojave was reaching out to members to get a sense of interest. They wanted to start, of course, in the areas with the most interest, and most of that was in Bullhead City and the Fort Mojave area. So that's currently where they're at now. Hundreds of thousands of miles of, tens of thousands of miles of fiber have been laid to date. The total cost right now is $110 million. We were, I should say, the first or maybe the second recipient of the state's Rural Broadband Development Grant project. Received $850,000 from there. But the way this project is put together, we are not reliant on grant funding. Grant funding, of course, is great, but of course we did not feel that we could embark on this if we had to rely on that. We wanted to make sure that we could be successful here without grant dollars. This is the first customer that we had connected on June 29th. He was a 1 gig up, 1 gig down customer. And, you know, I live in Central Phoenix. I can't even get that service. So, you know, we're really proud of this. We're really proud of that. We really just feel like this is co-ops at their best. In terms of other co-ops, we are conducting feasibility studies right now. I should say Sulphur Springs Valley Electric Co-op in Cochise County has been conducting a feasibility study. And we'll see where that goes. But like I said, once you've seen a co-op, you've seen a co-op, and we're all going to be different. And you know, the fact patterns and the sort of risk that we're willing to take on is going to be different as well. So happy to answer any questions. And my contact information is here. So if I can ever answer any questions, or if you ever want to chat over a cup of coffee, happy to.
Questions for Casey? So Casey, I have a number of questions. First of all, I think you have our plan to meet with Sandy. So a couple of questions for me. is there additional legislation that we need to do in the state or federally to make this more feasible for your members? Related to that, and I think you've sort of talked about this already, or what are the barriers to your members getting into doing this at this point in time? What can we do in the state, I guess, to make this more feasible for your members, if anything?
Well, Steve, that's a good question. I mean, it's in terms of legislation, it's hard to say because it's not really legislatively an issue, but I think it's more, it comes down to dollars and cents. Now, of course, yeah, I mean, the state budget is I guess legislative. That's always difficult, just because of I think the makeup of the legislature is such that recently that you weren't going to be seeing large dollars flow through to these programs, because you've had ARPA funds come through and IIJA, but it becomes a funding issue. And so I think one major thing for a lot of our co-ops is just grant writing. To the extent they're working with consultants like TWN, they embark on that. But some of these grant programs are complicated to figure out. And if you're so used to being an electric co-op and that's really the only hat you wear, that becomes complicated really quickly. Like I think I was telling you last week, Mojave Electric Co-op put in for RDOF funding, and the complexity there was so intense that, I always made the joke that if you could figure out RDOF, then you should have become an astronaut instead of working for a co-op, because it was, you can make the money available, but how customer friendly are you making it to entities on the ground that could actually put this to use? It doesn't make much sense to make it so complicated that some of these co-ops and other entities, it's not just co-ops, I'm sure tribal as well and other associated entities look at it and say, all right, how interested are we doing this? Because we're probably going to have to spend tens of thousands of dollars on, if not more, on a consultant just to, even get access to these dollars. And we may not even go this route. And so I don't know if that's a grant writing issue. The state, Keith and I've just started working with Sandeep, but Jeff before Sandeep have been really helpful. But they're also pulled in a lot of different directions. Of course, they're not here just to serve co-ops; they're here to serve the state and get broadband access out. So that's a long-winded way of saying, of course, funding. Who's going to say no to that? Of course, we'd all love more funding, but it's just being able to develop that know-how that's necessary to get the dollars from point A to point B.
So Casey, part of what you're describing is a common issue, and also what we've seen, and you've been in touch with Jeff before and Sandeep, and I don't know what that conversation has been yet, but I know when Jeff was here that he was a big advocate of broadband action teams and having teams in local communities who came together, put together the plan, and then either had people on staff or hired consultants to help write the grants. Because many communities and organizations do not have the capability, the experience to write those grants. And so if there's a way, if you think that one of the barriers is people not having the expertise to put together the plan and write the grants and stuff, then maybe that's something we can figure out how to help with. If that's where the barriers are.
Sure, and I think that's one barrier. One thing that I try to cheerlead for my members is the Rural Broadband Development Grant A. I believe that's of course, there's A and B. I believe A is the program that can help offset costs for feasibility studies. To me, that's critical because, and here's why. Because the grant program B, Mojave received $850,000. We're very grateful for that. We're very honored to be one of the first to receive funding from a program like that. But $850,000 in a $110 million bucket, it's not going to offset a ton of cost. But I think one of the barriers is the costs associated with feasibility studies, because like I was saying earlier, when you're talking about consultants and trying to, bridge that gap between having this funding program out there and actually receiving that funding, that's one barrier. But the cost of a feasibility study, what if, you're a co-op and, you're moderately interested, you'd be willing to do a study, but you're not sure you want to be spending the tens of thousands of dollars associated with that study. But if you can mitigate those concerns and mitigate the risk involved by having that grant program that can help offset those feasibility costs, at some point it becomes a no-brainer. And so I think that's really important. And I think protecting that funding stream is going to be critical as well. Certainly as the ARPA dollars that have gone through this program are granted out, we just got to make sure that those are protected.
So Casey, are there other states where the co-ops have been much more aggressive? And do you have anything about lessons learned from them about what made it feasible for them, what they did differently?
Yes, Tennessee, Missouri, Mississippi have gotten to be much bigger in terms of providing broadband, and it's not really apples to apples because Arizona, we have less co-ops. We have 6 distribution co-ops, but you get into Tennessee, you could have 30, maybe more. I'm not exactly sure how many there are in Tennessee or Missouri. But if you look at a map, most of the state is covered by co-op service territories. But they have smaller territories, which of course gets into economies of scale, but it's not really apples to apples. What I always say, and I've talked to Jeff about this, I've talked to legislators about this, and again, the more I work with Sandeep, I'm sure we'll have these conversations. For Arizona, the biggest thing for co-ops will be seeing Mojave Electric Co-op be successful with their project. $110 million is a big project, especially for a co-op. It's a massive undertaking. I believe they'll be successful. They have great leadership. They have board buy-in. They have community buy-in. They have a need for it. So I am very bullish on their project. I think it would be very important for other co-ops to see Mojave as a playbook to follow should they want to gain entry into this. And so that's what I always say. Are there lessons learned in other states? I'm sure there are. When you get to, I don't know that you can really look at it as a state on a state-to-state basis. I think a co-op will have to look at it on a co-op-to-co-op basis. For instance, let's just say Sulphur Springs. They would probably want to look at a co-op in Missouri that has same number of members, that features a military base and has a small town, if you could say that, a medium-sized city, like I'm thinking of like Sierra Vista in Missouri. And so I think that's where they would have to look for those lessons. Our CEOs, I will say, are having these conversations frequently. We're having Sandeep and Keith Watkins come talk to our members in February about all the grant programs that exist and that could help offset some of these costs. Of course, we're also having a conversation about challenging the FCC's maps. That is an issue, of course, for everybody. And one of the organizations that we work with very well is the National Farm Bureau Federation. This is something that they've challenged, as well as the Arizona Farm Bureau Federation. And so this is something that we do follow as well, and that'll be the next step as well.
Okay. Thank you. So I know you're meeting, as you said, with Keith and Sandeep. Is there anything else that we can do to help you to future discussions, engaging your members, or just kind of stay out of the way for now and let you, have Sandeep and so forth?
Right now, it's a delicate dance, I feel like, with my members. And I suppose that's an evergreen statement whenever you're in a member-based organization. We engage in this conversation, and I try to step away and let it marinate. So keep engaging with me. I like the idea of meetings like this where information can be shared. I'm interested to see, as I said, we'll be talking again in February with my CEOs on this issue. We engage on it, once a quarter, once every 6 months. And I think that's probably about the appropriate interval with my CEOs. Because some of them, broadband may not make sense. But for those that it could potentially make sense, we want to make sure all that information is available. So yeah, let's just, keep the conversation going between Steve, between you and I, and again, Steve, I believe you're going to make slides available. That includes my contact information. So If I can ever be of help, let me know.
Yeah. So Casey, as I told you, I've added you to our list. I should have done a long time ago. And so I've done that. And if you have any of your other co-ops who also would like to sit in on these meetings, I'd be glad to add them. So I don't do that without their permission, but I don't know if you want to reach out or you want me to reach out or not, because they might find this to be, interesting. And one of the things that we've tried to do with this group is to connect people and to be able to share ideas and resources and things like that. So if you think that might be beneficial, you're either welcome to send me their contact information and I'll add you to the list, reach out to them, make phone calls if I need to, or whatever. But I think it would be useful to have their participation.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that.
Hey, Steve, that's a good segue for a question for Casey. This is Kirk. Steve, how are you? I mean, Casey.
Go ahead.
How many co-ops are there in the state of Arizona? Electricity co-ops versus the big 3 utilities, 2 of which are regulated. One is SRP, obviously, which is a huge co-op.
So we have 7, and that's 6 distribution co-ops, and then 1 generation and transmission co-op. And Kirk, the distribution co-ops, those are the ones that are on the ground, of course, distribute your power. And so if when you pay your bill, you would pay it to the distribution co-op. But I will say the generation and transmission co-op continues to remain important. And I keep them involved in the conversation because they do have fiber assets and
is that SRP? Is SRP the only generation?
No. So the Arizona Electric Power Co-op, based in Benson, they are the generation and transmission co-op.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So Casey, some time ago, I'm sorry, go ahead, Kirk.
No, and the rest of distribution that obviously are part of the grid.
That's right.
buying and selling their power from so that would be how many generators? 4 generators, the 3 big utilities and the guys in Benson? How does that work?
Yes. So the distribution co-ops would buy their power from the Arizona Electric Power Cooperative.
Gotcha.
So does anybody know, a number of years ago, we had conversations with SRP and TEP about the same issue about using their dark fiber. Anybody know what's happened with that? Have we made any progress with that? Nothing's happening. Anybody have any perspective on that?
Mark's probably the best resource in that space. But I know that all the cooperation with the utilities and telecom and fiber has increased tremendously. I mean, back in the day, APS didn't want to play with fiber at all, and now have helicopters dragging huge fiber lines on their power lines all up and down the interstate. So, from that perspective, Steve, from the data center perspective, I only know, of course, all the big guys providing the big services to the data centers. But SRP is one of the top fiber providers in the country. That much I do know too. And Mesa's got more fiber in the ground than Chicago. Other than that, I don't really know.
So we should follow up with that also, kind of understand where that fits in. Okay, any other questions for Casey?
Well, I have a comment. This is Andy Sinclair at DES.
Andy, go ahead.
Casey, I appreciate the way you described the electrification of rural Arizona. And that's the way I explain it to everyone when we talk about broadband. It's not a luxury. This is a necessity. So I appreciate the way you explained that.
Thank you. Yeah, and Andy, the interesting thing is it's so easy, and we always try to connect it, is it's so easy for people to think of broadband being something that allows you to watch Netflix.
Exactly.
And I mean, yes, of course that's true, but when you talk about telehealth, when you talk about what we saw during the pandemic, where work from home is a necessity, you can't work from home if you don't have the access. And so I agree. Thank you. And that's always something that I try to connect with folks as well.
So Casey, one thing that we certainly saw with as COVID rolled in is that it changed the national dialogue about broadband. So for a long time, I mean, we've been involved and I think you and I probably been connected about broadband in the state for 20 some odd years, but now it has become a national priority as well as a state priority. And so the dialogue has changed, and what people are willing or not willing to do in terms of funding, support, and so forth is different than it was, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. A lot of stuff is happening now.
And to that point, Steve, I think that's one of the problems that we're having right now, trying to predict, everything economically and trying to slow down inflation and whether or not there's a recession coming, because there's so many more people online now. It's not only education, it's not only telemedicine, but it's also commerce. And it's hard to predict what what's going on in the economy, because we have a whole different economy now too, because there's so many more people online than were online before. So it's kind of funny to see how that's going to all shake out in the next couple of years. But like you said, it's a utility now. It's not something we take for granted. It's a necessity.
Anyway, anything else for Casey? Casey, anything else you want to add? Any other? I'm sorry, Casey.
Ask a quick question for Casey. Do you know what percentage of the rural households in Arizona are served by co-ops as opposed to, I assume the rest are served by APS and?
Yeah, so the percentage I don't have off the top of my head. We have, so I think you get back into the percentage with these numbers. So you got about 200,000 meters within the co-ops. And that translates to roughly 550,000 rural Arizonans. Now, of course, just a strict population number does not get you the households, but
Yeah, the number of rural, or I've seen that number for the number, the population in rural Arizona. I forget it. Is it something?
No,
like
not all of rural Arizona is co-op country. So you like Yuma will be APS, Ajo APS, Prescott APS. Yeah, that kind of gives you a sense of our size.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, thank you, Casey. Really appreciate it. It was really, I think, very informative for everybody. Just one more of those many resources that we need to know about.
Sure, and happy to talk. Everyone have a good Monday. Yeah. So here we go.
Good, thanks, Casey. So I think we're done for today. Unless anybody has anything else that they want to share today. If not, I'm going to stop the recording.